Hi, folks. We're Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the minimum wage. Now, when the minimum wage is increased, there's all sorts of noise and gnashing of teeth and chewing of fingernails and so on about, look at all the jobs that are going to be lost. If employers have to pay more money at the minimum wage level, by the way. So we're looking at a certain sort of employment here, burger flippers, toilet cleaners, or people painting nails in salons, that sort of thing. At that minimum wage level, an increase in the minimum wage will cause loss of jobs. Now, on the other side, which seems to see employment as something that should be and must be socialized in the same way as sort of communist theory would have it. The view is that these people in the minimum wage jobs, and there's been an explosion in minimum wage jobs in the West and a relative decline in better paid jobs. So these minimum wage jobs, the people on that minimum wage, they're the ones with the least social power. They need a higher wage, otherwise they won't get by. Now, these people on minimum wage live differently. Most people, if their income allows it, they live independently and this sort of thing, where they live or in family units. Whereas, a lot of these places, say in the United States, where they've got the people from impoverished third world shitholes coming to America, they're living. They can live, 10 people to a one-bedroom apartment, 15 to 20 people in a two-bedroom apartment, and so on. Even the sort of the lucky ones are still living, 12 to a three-bedroom house or something like that. So they live very differently and they pool their resources differently. There'll be, someone will do the cooking and they'll chop up all the food on the chopping board on the floor, and they'll have they'll cook for everybody. And so they're in terms of their own group social organization, they're reasonably efficient in terms of 20 people living in the two-bedroom apartment, and then they'll illegally bring in relatives to look after children, and so they don't have to pay for childcare. There's all sorts of things going on there as well. So they live and exist in very different social structures than Western people might live, which means they can afford to pool their piss poor hourly rate wages and still do okay, and living in conditions and circumstances that we in the West would consider to be unacceptable. 20 people sharing one toilet or one shower, to us would be, it's not something that we would countenance, but to them it may even be and is likely to be the step up from what they're used to in their very dirt poor basket case countries that they come from. So the idea is that these people living on the bottom need more money, and therefore the minimum wage should be increased. Now, at the same time as the crowd that say minimum wage should be increased, they scream and cry about the job losses, saying, well, people at the bottom shouldn't be laid off because they're getting a higher wage. What should happen is that the business, for example, take out food shop or something like that, the business should just simply charge more. They should increase their prices. So you get a feed into inflation, or the cost of this, the socialized cost of all this, is passed on to the consumer. So the argument is that these people should get a pay rise, but no one should lose their job. Now, if you're a business owner and you got to compete, if you say you're selling burgers or something, you got to compete with the burger place down the road and the pizza place on the corner and that sort of thing. So you have to look at it just from a pragmatic economic viewpoint. So well, look, I've got 10, for example, I've got 10 workers here, but Jose and Consuela, they're they hardly speak in English. They've got an IQ of 80 and they're pretty unreliable. I just can't rely on them to be effective. And so what I'll do, given this hourly wage rise, I'm going to have to let them go, and I'll give more work to Billy Bob and Jimmy Jack, because they are reliable workers. They turn up when they're supposed to. They do what they're told. They speak good English, and they're no, I'm not happy about that, because I'm a bit of a communist myself, and I'd rather Jose and Consuelo have the work. But bottom line is, I can't run a profitable business or a successful business if I pay these higher rates with workers that can't do the job. So the business tends to concentrate on the better workers, the more reliable workers, the more capable workers, the ones that speak English. So the minorities that otherwise at a very low wage would have got work, whether those jobs should be created, especially for imported third world illiterate peasants, you can argue separately and debate that separately. But as the business owner will gravitate towards, no, look, I need to survive here. I've got to depend on the more reliable, whether it be more skilled or more trainable or more capable, whatever workers. And then, in that way, so I'll give more work to the people that do the job, so that they can let go of two people and find they can pretty much still get all the work done that needs to be done. But now they've got two less workers who are the least efficient. So let's just see how this plays out then. So in the increase in the minimum wage, a business like a takeout food business, or it could be, I don't know, cleaning hotel rooms or so on, or whatever, the lower paid entry level type, lower paid jobs. The emphasis becomes, at least for the time being, emphasis becomes on efficiency. So, or pursuing efficiency. So they drop off the least effective workers, the least reliable, least dependable, least capable workers, who'll be the ones that supposedly are really in the most need, or the greater need of the higher hourly rate. So they get dropped off, and the more capable one gets kept. Now, the capable ones will be, there'll be a high proportion of white people in there, for example, and a lower proportion of brown, illiterate, third world peasants. So when we pursue, or if the higher wage rate, the increasing minimum wage creates, it changes the composition of the workforce. It changes the emphasis on we're socializing employment to give jobs to third world illiterate peasants. To no, my business, I can't pass on the cost, because the burger place around the corner, they're not increasing theirs. So if I increase the price of my burgers, then no one's going to buy my fucking burgers, and so therefore, I have to be able to keep the burgers at the price they're at, but increase the efficiency of the business, which means increase the efficiency and effectiveness and capability of the workers. Just so happens a higher proportion of those happen to be white local people, rather than, again, the illiterate third world peasants. Now, there's also another factor, if you like, or effect and factor here. As the minimum wage is increased, it then begins to attract people otherwise may not have considered that employment. So, the white college kid, for example, the white college kid who has taken a job that he particularly wouldn't want. He's got to travel into the city to do it, but it's doing whatever, but it's a job that he can get. So say he's a departmental supervisor in a retail store. And he gets a little bit more than minimum wage, but he's got a bit of a long commute, a long travel, and he prefers something more local, and so he gets a job. So when he sees the minimum wage has gone up, to a certain level, well, gee, you know what? I think I'll go and work at that burger place down the road there, rather than commute into the city. And okay, I'll lose $1 an hour, but then I don't have to do all that traveling and pay for the public transport. So I'll go and get a job in that burger place. And the burger guy is oh wow, okay, I've got a pretty bright, hardworking, keen, eager, motivated college kid doing the work, and he'll do more work than the average employee I would get. He'll do the minimum if they can. So they've got the motivated employees. Now, this is how it used to be with the minimum wage and high school jobs, college kid type jobs when I was a kid. I remember there were some slackers and freeloaders for sure, but the most of the kids who were say, you get a job in the local grocery store, just sweeping the floor, or I don't know, you packing the shelves, or whatever it was. Everyone seemed to be quite motivated and keen to do well and to do the best and to work. And nobody, there weren't just people there who were slacking off. There weren't people who were just there to sort of hide in the shadows, do nothing, and but get their pay at the end. People seem motivated to do the work. Well, that's how I recall it anyway. So this motivated worker has been lost in the meantime. Like, you used to go into McDonald's 30 years ago, and there'd be keen, eager young things, high school kids, college kids, that's the keen, eager, trying to do their best and wanting to give good service, this sort of thing, to today, where you're lucky if when you go in to buy something, assuming they can even speak English, where you go into a takeout food store, and you're lucky if they don't tell you to get fucked or something. And they don't give a shit, quite clearly. I mean, the transformation in attitude is just wow. You can barely so looking at as the average wage is increased, then attracts a different sort of worker who maybe is more motivated and keener and wants to do a good job and that sort of stuff. So when we look at minimum wage increases, the knock-on effects and the collateral effects are actually fairly wide, and in many ways they increase the efficiency of certain industries and make the jobs much harder in the end for the low IQ peasants, because they don't do good quality work. They do the minimum work, and they'll try and get away with doing nothing if they can. And so to any employer in these places, why would they want that when they can get someone that actually wants to work and wants to do a good job? So the effects aren't just that jobs are lost, and isn't that terrible, but how the composition of efficiency and attitudes, the sort of worker that might be attracted, and the sort of worker that the business needs in order to survive and prosper, that changes, almost has a chemical reaction that goes right through. Now, in closing here, there are some that view that employment and jobs should be socialized. Jobs are owned by the society, not by the business, or not by the employer. And that's an ideological battle that's still raging, one that's been really, really distorted and perverted by mass peasant migration into the West. That there's this view that socialized employment, jobs that are owned by the society at large, is really the future. But when we look at efficiency and profitability, automation, artificial intelligence, and these factors, is it possible that jobs can be socialized, or owned by the society? And if so, which jobs? And if efficiency is going to be the issue, then that will disproportionately affect the socialized jobs, which there are many now, the doll's house jobs, the sandpit jobs, the girly jobs, all this sort of thing. All that's going to be affected as well. So if jobs are to continue to be socialized in the way that, in many places they are, such as the Googles of the world and the like, where they've got these do nothing, product designers that sit around making silly little girly videos. If they're going to be, if affirmative action and diversity, equity, inclusion is to be protected, then the only path for employment is to be socialized employment. If, on the other hand, it goes in the other direction, then we're going to see a huge shakeout of affirmative action and DEI. And this is going to have also many knock-on effects in many areas. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.